In a quiet suburban neighborhood, where the hum of lawnmowers mingled with the laughter of children, a border collie named Max became an unlikely hero. Max, with his sharp eyes and boundless energy, wasn't just a pet to the Thompson family. He was a compass, guiding them toward lost souls in need. When 9-year-old Ellie stumbled upon a strange discovery in their backyard, it sparked a journey that would unravel a mystery, unite a community, and reveal the depths of a dog's devotion. This is the story of Max's mission, a tale of instinct and heart that began with a single puzzling moment and grew into something extraordinary, proving that sometimes the smallest clues lead to the greatest acts of love. The sun hung low over the Thompsons' backyard, casting golden streaks across the grass where Ellie kicked her soccer ball with practiced ease. At 9 years old, she was all elbows and determination, her dark ponytail bouncing as she aimed for an imaginary goalpost between the swing set and the old oak tree. Her border collie, Max, usually her enthusiastic teammate, wasn't chasing the ball today. Instead, he lingered near the weathered shed in the corner of the yard, his black and white fur ruffled by the late afternoon breeze. Ellie paused, hands on her hips, and squinted at him. "Max, come on, you're supposed to be goalie," she called, her voice bright but edged with confusion. Max didn't budge. His nose was pressed to the ground, one paw scraping at the dirt beneath the shed's sagging foundation. Inside the house, Sarah Thompson wrestled with a pile of laundry, the scent of lavender detergent clinging to her hands. The kitchen radio hummed a soft country tune, blending with the rhythmic thump of Ellie's soccer ball outside. Sarah glanced through the window, smiling at her daughter's relentless energy. Ellie was a spark, always moving, always dreaming up new games for Max to join. But something about Max's stillness caught Sarah's eye. He wasn't bounding after the ball or barking at squirrels like usual. Instead, he was fixated, his tail low and his body tense. Sarah frowned, setting down a half-folded towel. Max was 7, still spry enough to outrun Ellie on their morning jogs, but the past few days he'd been off, quieter, less interested in his favorite squeaky toy. She'd chalked it up to the recent heat wave, but now watching him dig with such focus, a prickle of worry stirred in her chest. "Mom!" Ellie's shout sliced through the quiet, sharp, and urgent. Sarah's heart skipped, and she hurried to the back door, her sneakers squeaking on the tile. "Mom, there's a weird lump under the shed." Ellie was kneeling by Max now, her hands hovering over the dirt where Max's paws had churned up the soil. Max didn't look up, his digging, slow but deliberate, like he was uncovering a secret he'd been guarding for days. Sarah crossed the yard in quick strides, her mind flashing to worst-case scenarios, a buried bone, a dead critter, or something worse. "What's going on, Elle?" she asked, crouching beside her daughter. The air smelled of earth and grass, and Max's fur was dusted with dirt. "Look!" Ellie pointed to a small, uneven mound where Max had scraped away the topsoil. Something peeked through the dirt, not a rock or a root, but a strip of fabric, muddy and worn. Sarah's brow furrowed. She brushed her fingers over it, feeling the rough texture of nylon. "Is that a collar?" Ellie's eyes widened, her voice a mix of awe and unease. Sarah dug gently with her hands, careful not to disturb Max, who had paused to watch her, his brown eyes steady and unblinking. The collar emerged, its faded blue surface caked with grime. No tags, no buckle, just a torn loop that looked like it had been buried for months, maybe longer. Max let out a soft whine, his tail giving a single hesitant wag. Sarah held the collar up, turning it over in the fading light. "Where did this come from?" she murmured, more to herself than Ellie. Max nudged her hand, his nose warm against her skin, as if urging her to keep looking. Ellie leaned closer, her soccer ball forgotten. "Max found it, Mom. He knew it." Was there? Her voice was soft, almost reverent, and Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cooling evening air. Max had always been smart, herding Ellie away from busy streets, fetching his leash when it was time for a walk. But this felt different, purposeful, like he was trying to tell them something. "Ellie, go grab a plastic bag from the kitchen," Sarah said, keeping her tone calm despite the knot in her stomach. Ellie darted off, her sneakers pounding the grass, while Sarah ran her hand along Max's back. "What's got you so worked up, boy?" she whispered. Max's ears twitched, but he didn't move, his gaze fixed on the spot where the collar had been. Sarah glanced at the shed, its peeling paint and warped wood suddenly seeming less ordinary. Had Max been digging here before and she hadn't noticed? The past few days replayed in her mind, Max skipping his morning treats, lying by the shed instead of napping on the porch, his eyes tracking something invisible in the distance. Ellie returned, clutching a sandwich bag, and Sarah slipped the collar inside, sealing it with a sense of finality. "Should we tell Dad?" Ellie asked, her fingers twisting the hem of her shirt. Sarah nodded. Tom, her husband, was still at the hardware store where he worked, but he'd want to know about this. "We'll show him when he gets home," Sarah said, standing and brushing dirt from her jeans. Max finally stepped back, but he didn't relax. He sat, ears perked, as if waiting for their next move. The backyard, once a place of games and laughter, now felt like the starting point of something bigger, something Max had already begun to unravel. As the sky deepened to twilight, Sarah and Ellie headed inside, Max trailing close behind. The collar sat on the kitchen counter, an unassuming object that carried a weight Sarah couldn't yet name. Ellie's chatter filled the house, but Sarah's thoughts were on Max, his quiet determination, his unshakable focus. Whatever he'd found, it wasn't random, and whatever he was chasing, it was only the beginning. The kitchen was warm with the scent of roasting chicken as Sarah set the table for dinner, but her eyes kept drifting to the plastic bag on the counter. The muddy collar inside seemed to pulse with questions, its presence a quiet challenge to the normalcy of their evening routine. Max, usually sprawled under the table waiting for stray crumbs, wasn't there. Instead, he was by the back door, his black and white fur barely visible through the glass as he stared out at the shed. Ellie, perched on a stool with her math homework, noticed it too. "He's still acting weird, Mum," she said, her pencil hovering over a half-solved equation. Sarah forced a smile, but the worry that had sparked in the backyard was now a steady flame. Max's behavior wasn't just unusual, it was urgent, and the collar was only the first piece of a puzzle they didn't yet understand. Tom arrived home just as Sarah pulled the chicken from the oven, his work boots thudding against the mat as he shook off the day. "Smells amazing in here," he called, but his grin faded when he saw Sarah's expression. She handed him the plastic bag without a word, and Ellie launched into the story before he could ask. "Max dug it up, Dad. It was under the shed, all buried and gross, and he wouldn't stop digging until we found it." Tom turned the collar over in his hands, his brow creasing. "This looks old," he said, rubbing a thumb over the frayed nylon. "Could be from a neighbor's dog, maybe lost years ago." But his voice lacked conviction, and when he glanced at Max, still stationed by the door, his jaw tightened. "He's been like this all day." "Longer," Sarah admitted, setting a plate of green beans on the table. "He's been off for days, no fetch, no chasing squirrels. He's barely touched his food this morning." She recounted Max's recent quirks, skipping his favorite tug-of-war game, lingering by the shed even during yesterday's drizzle, waking up at odd hours to pace the hallway. Tom crouched by Max, running a hand along his flank. "You okay, buddy?" Max's tail gave a half-hearted thump, but his eyes stayed fixed on the backyard, as if the shed held a secret only he could see. Dinner was quieter than usual. Ellie pushed her beans around her plate, her usual chatter replaced by thoughtful glances at Max. "What if he's sick?" she asked suddenly, her voice small. Sarah's heart squeezed. She'd considered it too. Max was 7, not old for a border collie, but not immune to health issues. "He's not acting sick," she said, trying to sound reassuring. "He's acting focused, like he's got a job to do." Tom nodded, but his fork paused mid-air. "Maybe we should call Dr. Larson, just to be safe." Sarah agreed, and after clearing the dishes, she dialed the vet's office, leaving a message about Max's behavior and the collar. The act felt like a step forward, but it didn't ease the tension coiling in her chest. That night, sleep came fitfully for Sarah. She woke at 2 a.m. to a soft whine, her eyes adjusting to the dim glow of the hallway nightlight. Max stood at the back door, his silhouette sharp against the glass. She slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Tom, and padded downstairs. "What is it, Max?" she whispered, kneeling beside him. His ears twitched, and he pressed his nose to the door, letting out another low whine. Outside, the backyard was still, the shed a dark shape under the moon's pale light. Sarah hesitated, then grabbed a flashlight and her jacket. If Max was this insistent, she needed to see why. The night air was cool, carrying the faint scent of damp earth. Max trotted straight to the shed, his steps purposeful, and began circling it, sniffing the ground. Sarah followed, the flashlight beam sweeping over the dirt. Nothing looked different. No new lumps, no disturbed soil. But Max's intensity was unnerving. He paused at the same spot where they'd found the collar, pawing once before sitting and staring at her. "There's nothing else here, boy," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But Max didn't move, his eyes catching the light like twin stars. Sarah's skin prickled. This wasn't about a bone or a lost toy. Max was trying to tell them something, and they were missing it. Back inside, Sarah couldn't shake the image of Max's steady gaze. She checked on Ellie, who was fast asleep with her soccer ball tucked against her pillow, then returned to bed, her mind racing. The collar, Max's fixation, his sudden shift in behavior, it all pointed to something bigger. By morning, Dr. Larson had called back, suggesting they bring Max in for a checkup. "Could be stress or an environmental trigger," he said over the phone. "Dogs like Max are sensitive. If he's fixated on something, there's a reason." Sarah scheduled an appointment for the next day, but the vet's words only deepened her unease. What was Max sensing that they couldn't? As Sarah poured, "Coffee?" Ellie bounded downstairs, her backpack slung over one shoulder. "Is Max going to the vet?" she asked, glancing at the dog, who was now lying by the back door, his head resting on his paws. Sarah nodded. "Just to make sure he's okay." Ellie knelt beside Max, stroking his ears. "You're not sick, are you? You're just being a detective." Max licked her hand, and for a moment the kitchen felt normal again. But when Sarah looked at the collar, still sealed in its bag on the counter, the weight of the unknown settled. Back in. Max wasn't just acting strange, he was leading them somewhere, and they had to follow. The Thompson house buzzed with the usual morning chaos. Ellie scrambling to find her math notebook, Tom gulping coffee before his shift, and Sarah packing lunches. But Max's quiet presence cast a shadow over the routine. He lay by the back door, his eyes fixed on the shed, as if the answers to his restless nights were buried in its weathered wood. The muddy collar, still sealed in its plastic bag, sat on the kitchen counter like a silent accusation. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that Max's strange behavior was more than instinct. It was a call to action, a plea for them to listen. As a thunderstorm loomed on the horizon, Max's determination would lead the family to a discovery that deepened the mystery and set them on a path they couldn't ignore. Rain clouds gathered as Sarah drove Ellie to school, Max curled up in the back seat instead of his usual perch by the window. Ellie twisted around, her brow furrowed. "Eyes not even looking outside, Mom, that's his favorite thing." Sarah glanced in the rearview mirror, catching Max's steady gaze. "He's just tired, Elle," she said, but the words felt hollow. Max wasn't tired. He was waiting. After dropping Ellie off, Sarah called Dr. Larson's office to confirm the afternoon appointment, then headed home, Max's leash slack in her hand as he trotted straight to the shed. The air was thick with the promise of rain, and Sarah's stomach churned with a mix of worry and curiosity. What was Max chasing? Tom was already at work, so Sarah spent the morning tidying the house, her eyes drifting to Max through the kitchen window. He hadn't moved from the shed, his nose pressed to the ground, circling the same spot where they'd found the collar. The vet's words echoed in her mind. Dogs like Max are sensitive. There's a reason. Sarah grabbed her phone and scrolled through old photos, pausing on one of Max chasing Ellie across the park last summer, his tongue lolling, eyes bright. The contrast to his current focus was stark. She was about to call Tom when a low rumble of thunder rolled in, and Max's head snapped up, his body tensing. The storm hit fast, rain pelting the windows and lightning flashing across the darkening sky. Sarah expected Max to retreat to his usual spot under the dining table, He'd always been skittish during storms, but instead he bolted to the back door, barking sharply. "Max, stay!" Sarah called, grabbing her raincoat, but he was already pouring at the door, his whines urgent. Her heart raced. This wasn't fear, it was purpose. She yanked on her boots, snatched a flashlight, and opened the door. Max shot into the rain, straight for the shed, his fur soaked in seconds. Sarah followed, the downpour stinging her face, her shoes sinking into the muddy grass. Max was digging again, his paws churning through the wet soil beneath the shed's foundation. Lightning illuminated the yard, casting eerie shadows, and Sarah knelt beside him, the flashlight beam trembling in her hand. "What is it, boy?" she shouted over the wind. Max didn't stop, his movements frantic but precise. The dirt gave way to something metallic, a rusted tag, half buried and glinting in the light. Sarah's breath caught. She reached into the mud, her fingers closing around the tag, its edges sharp against her skin. Max sat back panting as if he'd done his part. Sarah wiped the tag clean, her hands shaking. Etched into the metal was a single word: Buddy. The name hit her like a jolt. Ellie had mentioned a missing dog poster months ago, tacked to the community board at the park. Sarah hadn't paid much attention then, but now with the collar and this tag, the pieces felt connected. She tucked the tag into her pocket, her mind racing. Was Buddy a lost pet? Had Max known about him all along? The rain slowed to a drizzle, and Max nudged her arm, his wet fur pressing against her. "Good boy," she whispered, her voice thick. She stood, scanning the yard, the shed suddenly looming larger, its secrets only beginning to surface. Back inside, Sarah dried Max with a towel, his eyes never leaving her as she placed the tag next to the collar on the counter. She texted Tom a photo of the tag, her fingers fumbling. "Max found this. Says Buddy. I think it's important." Tom replied instantly. "Buddy? Like the missing dog? I'm coming home early." Sarah nodded to herself, then called Dr. Larson, her voice steady despite the knot in her chest. "Max found something else. A tag with a name. I think it's tied to his behavior." The vet's tone was calm but serious. "Bring it with you this afternoon. It might help us figure out what's driving him." As Sarah waited for Tom, she sat by Max, stroking his damp fur. The storm had passed, leaving a quiet that felt heavy with anticipation. She remembered Ellie's words. He's being a detective. It didn't feel like an exaggeration anymore. Max wasn't just digging up objects. He was unearthing a story, one that started with a lost dog named Buddy and stretched into the unknown. Sarah's gaze drifted to the shed, barely visible through the misty window. Whatever Max was leading them toward, it was bigger than their backyard, and it was only a matter of time before they found out how much. When Tom's truck pulled into the driveway, Sarah felt a surge of relief. He stepped inside, his work jacket damp, and hugged her tightly. "We'll figure this out," he said, glancing at Max, who had risen to his feet, tail wagging faintly. Sarah showed him the tag, its faint engraving catching the kitchen light. "Ellie's right," Tom said softly. "He's trying to tell us something." Max let out a low huff, as if in agreement, and Sarah knew they couldn't ignore him any longer. The tag was a clue, and Max was their guide. The Thompson kitchen glowed under the soft light of the chandelier, but the warmth of the room couldn't dispel the chill of the mystery unfolding on the counter. The muddy collar and rusted tag inscribed with Buddy lay side by side, tangible proof of Max's uncanny instincts. The border collie sat by the back door, his eyes flickering between the shed and Sarah, as if urging her to act. Ellie's words from earlier echoed in Sarah's mind. He's a detective. Now, with Tom home and the weight of the discoveries settling in, the family realized Max wasn't just reacting to something. He was leading them toward a truth they needed to uncover. Inspired by their dog's persistence, the Thompsons embarked on a search that would test their trust in Max and reveal the depth of his quiet heroism. Tom set his coffee mug down, his fingers tracing the edge of the tag. "Buddy," he murmured, glancing at Sarah. "You think it's the same dog from the poster Ellie saw?" Sarah nodded, her thoughts racing. "It has to be. Ellie mentioned it months ago. A beagle, I think, lost near the park. I didn't think much of it then, but now..." She gestured to Max, who had shifted closer. His ears perked. He's been fixated on that shed for days. He knew the collar was there, and now this tag. It's like he's following a trail. Ellie burst into the kitchen, her backpack still on, eyes wide. Are we going to find Buddy? Max can do it, I know he can. Sarah exchanged a look with Tom, a silent agreement passing between them. They couldn't ignore Max's behavior any longer, and Ellie's enthusiasm was infectious. Let's start by checking the community board, Sarah suggested. Maybe the poster's still up or someone knows more. Tom nodded, grabbing his keys. I'll drive. We can take Max, see if he picks up on anything. Ellie clapped, her hands already tugging on Max's leash. The border collie stood, his tail wagging with purpose, as if he'd been waiting for this moment all along. The park was a short drive away, its playground quiet under the post-storm sky. Max trotted ahead, his nose low, while Ellie skipped beside him, pointing out the community board near the entrance. The corkboard was cluttered with flyers. Bake, sales, yoga classes, lost keys. But one faded poster caught Sarah's eye. She peeled it back, revealing a grainy photo of a beagle with soulful eyes. Lost Buddy, the text read. 3-year-old male beagle, brown and white, last seen near. Oak Trail, reward offered. The contact number was barely legible, smudged by rain, but Sarah snapped a photo. This is it, she said, her voice tight. Max sniffed the ground nearby, his movements deliberate, as if the poster confirmed something he already knew. Back you. Home, Sarah called the number on the poster, her heart sinking when it went to voicemail. She left a message mentioning the collar and tag, then turned to Tom and Ellie, who were sprawled on the living room floor with Max. What now? Ellie asked, scratching Max's ears. Tom rubbed his chin. We take Max to Oak Trail, that's where Buddy was last seen. If he's picking up on something, that's the place to start. Sarah hesitated, the weight of the unknown pressing down, but Max's steady gaze, calm yet insistent, silenced her doubts. Okay, she said. Tomorrow morning, we go. The next day dawned clear, the air crisp with the scent of wet grass. Oak Trail was a winding path behind the park, bordered by dense shrubs and towering pines. Max led the way, his leash loose in Ellie's hand, his nose skimming the ground. Sarah and Tom followed, their eyes scanning the underbrush for anything out of place. Ellie chattered nervously, her voice a bright thread in the quiet. Maybe Buddy's hiding out here, like a secret agent dog. Sarah smiled, but her attention was on Max, who had quickened his pace, pulling toward a narrow side path overgrown with weeds. Max stopped abruptly at a ditch, his ears twitching, and let out a sharp bark. Sarah's pulse quickened. What is it, boy? She asked, kneeling beside him. Tom pushed back the tall grass, revealing a torn leash tangled in the roots of a shrub. Its faded green fabric was frayed, one end chewed as if a dog had fought to break free. Ellie gasped. Is that Buddy's? Sarah's throat tightened. Maybe, she said, carefully untangling the leash and slipping it into her bag. Max sat back, his eyes locked on the path ahead, as if the leash was only a stepping stone to something bigger. That afternoon they visited Dr. Larson, the collar, tag, and leash in tow. Max sat calmly in the exam room, his energy focused rather than anxious. Dr. Larson examined him, checking his heart, eyes, and joints. Physically, he's perfect, the vet said, setting down his stethoscope. But his behavior, fixating on the shed, finding these items, it's not random. Border collies are intuitive. He's reacting to something specific, maybe a scent or a memory tied to that area. He studied the leash, his brow furrowing. This looks like it was deliberately left. I checked with the shelter. They might know more about Buddy's case. At the local shelter, a volunteer named Maria recognized Buddy's name immediately. He was here briefly last spring, she said, pulling up a file. Stray, no chip, very skittish. We placed him with a foster, but he escaped after a week. The foster family searched for months, but she trailed off, her eyes softening. If Max found his collar, maybe he's still out there. Sarah showed her the leash and Maria's expression shifted. That's not Buddy's. His was red. But this ditch, it's near where we found other strays. Something's not right. Driving home, Sarah felt a mix of hope and unease. Max had led them to 2 clues tied to Buddy, and possibly more. Ellie, clutching the shelter's flyer, was already planning Max's mission in her notebook, sketching a map of Oak Trail. Tom reached for Sarah's hand. "He's not going to stop, is he?" he said, glancing at Max in the back seat. Sarah shook her head. "No, and neither are we." Max let out a soft huff, his eyes bright, as if he'd been waiting for them to catch up. The trail was growing clearer, and Buddy, or whatever Max was chasing, was closer than they thought. The Thompson family's home hummed with a new kind of energy, one fueled by Max's relentless determination and the clues he'd unearthed, the collar, the tag, and the torn leash. Each item was a breadcrumb in a trail that seemed to lead toward a lost beagle named Buddy, but Sarah sensed it was more than just one dog story. Max, their intuitive border collie, had become a beacon, his sharp instincts guiding them toward something deeper. As the family followed his lead, a moment of pure connection would unfold, proving Max's heart was bigger than they ever imagined, and setting the stage for a journey that would change their lives, and others, forever. Morning light filtered through the kitchen curtains as Sarah sipped her coffee, her gaze drifting to Max. He was stationed by the back door again, his black and white fur catching the sun as he stared at the shed. The collar, tag, and leash sat in a neat row on the counter, each item meticulously cleaned and stored in plastic bags, evidence of Max's growing mission. Ellie bounded downstairs, her Max's mission notebook tucked under her arm, already open to a page filled with doodles of Buddy and a map of Oak Trail. "We're going back today, right?" she asked, her eyes bright with purpose. Sarah nodded, feeling a swell of pride. "Right after breakfast." Tom, flipping pancakes at the stove, glanced at Max. "He's not letting this go, is he?" he said, a mix of awe and amusement in his voice. Robin's pancake landed on the counter. Sarah smiled softly. "No, and I don't think we can either." Max's focus was infectious, pulling the family into a shared sense of purpose. After breakfast, they piled into the car, Max in the back with his nose pressed to the window, his tail wagging faintly. The plan was simple: return to Oak Trail, let Max lead, and search for any sign of Buddy or other clues. The air was crisp, the ground still damp from the recent storm, and Sarah felt a quiet resolve settle over her. Max was their guide, and they trusted him completely. Oak Trail was quieter than the day before, the usual joggers and dog walkers scarce. Max trotted ahead, his leash loose in Ellie's hand, his movements precise as he wove through the underbrush. Sarah and Tom followed, their eyes scanning the path for anything unusual. A scrap of fabric, a disturbed patch of dirt, anything that might point to Buddy. Ellie hummed softly, her soccer ball tucked under one arm, her optimism a steady light in the morning haze. "Buddy's out here somewhere," she said, her voice firm. "Max will find him." They walked deeper into the trail, past the ditch where they'd found the leash, the trees closing in around them. Max's pace quickened, his ears twitching as he veered off the main path toward a cluster of tall grass and brambles. Sarah's heart skipped. "He's got something," she said, hurrying to keep up. Max stopped abruptly, his nose low, and let out a soft whine. The family gathered around him, the air thick with anticipation. Tom pushed back the grass, revealing a small, shivering shape curled in the shadows, a beagle puppy, barely a year old, with matted brown and white fur and a faint scar on its paw. "Oh my gosh," Ellie gasped, dropping to her knees. The puppy flinched but didn't run, its wide eyes locking onto Max. Max lay down, his body low and calm, his tail wagging gently. The puppy inched closer, sniffing Max's nose, and then pressed against him, trembling but trusting. Sarah's throat tightened, tears pricking her eyes. "Good boy, Max," she whispered, her voice thick. Tom crouched beside the puppy, his hands gentle as he checked for a collar. There was none, but the scar and the puppy's skittish demeanor told a story of hardship. "Is it Buddy?" Ellie asked, her hands clasped tightly. Sarah shook her head, studying the puppy's delicate frame. "No, this one's too young, but Max found her for a reason." Ellie's face lit up. "Can we keep her, please?" Tom and Sarah exchanged a glance, the weight of the decision tempered by the sight of Max nuzzling the puppy. his calm presence a balm to her fear. "We'll take her home. Get her checked out," Sarah said. "Then we'll see." Ellie threw her arms around Max, her laughter ringing through the trees. They carried the puppy, whom Ellie named Luna, back to the car, Max trotting beside them, his energy lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. At home, Sarah set up a soft blanket in the laundry room, filling bowls with water and kibble. Luna ate hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence, her tail giving a tentative wag. Max lay nearby, watching her with a quiet pride that made Sarah's heart swell. Ellie sat cross-legged on the floor, sketching Luna in her notebook, already planning her recovery. "She's part of Max's mission now," she declared. That afternoon, they took Luna to Dr. Larson, who confirmed she was malnourished but otherwise healthy. "She's been on her own for a while," he said, cleaning the scar on her paw. "But she's young. With care, she'll bounce back." He glanced at Max, who sat by the exam table, his eyes never leaving Luna. "Your dog's got a gift." "I've seen smart dogs, but Max, he's something else." Sarah nodded, her chest tight with gratitude. "He's our hero." Back home, Luna curled up in Max's bed, her small body pressed against his. Max didn't mind, his steady breathing a comfort to her. Sarah watched them, a warmth spreading through her. Max hadn't found Buddy, but he'd saved Luna, and that was a victory that echoed beyond their home. Tom joined her, slipping an arm around her shoulders. "This is just the start, isn't it?" he said, his voice soft. Sarah leaned into him, her eyes on Max and Luna. "Yeah," she said. "And Max is leading the way." As night fell, Ellie read to Luna from her favorite book, her voice a gentle cadence. Max listened, his head resting on his paws, his mission far from over. Luna's rescue was a breakthrough, a heartwarming moment that deepened the family's trust in their dog and ignited a spark of hope. Whatever lay ahead, Buddy, more lost dogs, or a larger mystery, Max would guide them, one determined step at a time. The Thompson household had transformed into a haven, not just for Max and their newly rescued beagle puppy Luna, but for a growing sense of purpose that rippled beyond their walls. Max, the border collie whose instincts had led them to Luna, was no longer just their loyal companion. He was a catalyst, drawing the family and their small town into a shared mission. The collar, tag, and leash, now carefully stored in a drawer, were relics of a mystery still unfolding, but Luna's presence was a living testament to Max's heart. As word of his heroics spread, the community rallied around the Thompsons, turning Max's mission into a collective effort that warmed hearts and forged unexpected bonds. Sarah woke to the sound of Max's gentle nudge against the bedroom door, his nose pressing into the wood as if to say, "Time to get moving." Luna trailed behind him, her steps tentative but steadier than the day before. In the kitchen, Ellie was already at the table, her Max's mission notebook open, a colored pencil in hand as she sketched Luna curled up in Max's bed. "Mom, we need to tell everyone about Luna," Ellie said, her eyes bright. "Maybe they'll help us find Buddy." Sarah smiled, ruffling her daughter's hair. "You're right, Elle. Let's start with the neighbors." Max let out a soft bark, as if approving the plan, and Sarah felt a surge of warmth. This wasn't just their story anymore. It was everyone's. Tom, sipping coffee, raised an eyebrow. "You think the neighborhood's ready for Max's fan?" "Club," he teased, but his grin betrayed his pride. Sarah laughed, but the idea stuck. After breakfast, they printed flyers with Luna's photo and a brief story of Max's rescue, crediting his instincts. Ellie insisted on adding a drawing of Max with a superhero cape, captioned, "Max's Mission, Finding the Lost." They tacked the flyers to telephone poles, the community board at the park, and the bulletin board outside the local coffee shop. Max trotted beside them, Luna on a new leash, her tail wagging as passers-by stopped to coo over her. "What a hero!" an elderly woman said, patting Max's head. Sarah beamed, but Max's eyes stayed alert, scanning the street as if he knew more was coming. By afternoon, the response was overwhelming. Neighbors knocked on the Thompsons' door, bearing dog treats, old blankets, and stories of their own lost pets. Mrs. Carter from across the street shared how her terrier vanished 2 summers ago, her voice cracking as she petted Luna. "If your Max can find dogs like this, maybe there's hope," she said. Sarah listened, her heart aching, and promised to keep her updated. Ellie, meanwhile, organized a Max's Mission meeting with her friends at school, convincing her teacher to let them use the art room. "We're going to make posters and collect stuff for strays," she announced, her notebook now filled with ideas for a pet supply drive. That evening, the Thompsons' porch became an impromptu hub. A neighbor dropped off a bag of kibble, another brought a water bowl, and a local teenager offered to design a Max's Mission logo. Sarah and Tom set up a small station by the front door, a crate with blankets, a bowl of water, and a sign reading, "For Max's Friends." Max seemed to understand, lying beside the crate with Luna curled against him, his presence a quiet invitation. When a jogger paused to ask about the flyers, Sarah shared Max's story, and the woman's eyes lit up. "I saw a dog like Buddy near the old mill last month," she said. "Thought it was a stray." Sarah jotted down the details, her pulse quickening. Max's ears twitched as if he'd heard the clue too. The next day, Ellie's school meeting was a hit. 12 kids showed up armed with crayons and poster board, creating signs that read, "Join Max's Mission and help us find Buddy." One boy, Tim, shyly admitted his cat had gone missing weeks ago. Ellie squeezed his hand. "Max will help, I promise." Sarah, who'd come to supervise, watched with pride as the kids brainstormed ways to spread the word, flyers at the library, a bake sale for shelter donations, even a lost pet patrol to check local trails. Max sat in the corner, his tail wagging as if he knew he'd inspired it all. Word of Max's heroics reached the local newspaper, and a reporter called to schedule an interview. "People love a good dog story," she said, and Sarah agreed, though she emphasized it was Max's instincts, not their doing. The article ran the next morning with a photo of Max and Luna on the front page, headlined, "Local Dog's Mission Saves Stray, Inspires Town." By lunchtime, the Thompsons' mailbox was stuffed with letters, some offering donations, others sharing tips about stray sightings. One note from a farmer near Oak Trail mentioned a dog skulking around his barn. "Might be your Buddy," it read. Sarah showed it to Tom, her hope flaring. That night, Max barked at the front door, sharp and insistent. Sarah rushed to open it, expecting another neighbor, but instead found a scruffy terrier sitting on the porch, no collar, his ribs visible under matted fur. Max stepped forward, nose to nose with the newcomer, and the terrier relaxed, tail wagging faintly. Ellie gasped. "Another one!" Tom grabbed a blanket, and they coaxed the dog inside, naming him Scout. Luna watched from Max's bed, her confidence growing as she sniffed the newcomer. Sarah's heart swelled. Max wasn't just finding dogs, he was building a family. They settled Scout with food and water. Sarah looked at Max, who sat by the porch station, his eyes scanning the darkness. The community's support, Ellie's passion, and Max's unwavering focus had turned their home into a beacon. Scout's arrival was proof that Max's mission was growing, touching lives beyond their own. Neighbors waved as they passed. Kids left chalk drawings of Max on the sidewalk, and the porch station became a symbol of hope. Sarah knew the mystery of Buddy, and whatever Max was chasing, was far from solved. But with the town behind them, they were ready for whatever came next. The Thompson porch, now adorned with a crate of blankets and a water bowl labeled Max's Friends, had become a beacon of hope in their small town. Max, the border collie whose instincts had led to the rescues of Luna and Scout, was a local legend, his story uniting neighbors in a shared mission to find lost pets. Ellie's Max's Mission notebook overflowed with sketches and plans, while the community's support, flyers, donations, and tips about stray sightings, grew stronger each day. Yet beneath the warmth of their progress, a shadow loomed. Max's relentless focus hinted at a larger puzzle, one tied to the collar, tag, and leash, and possibly to Buddy, the missing beagle. When a cryptic note appeared, the family realized Max was uncovering not just lost dogs, but a troubling secret that someone wanted to keep buried. Sarah woke to the soft patter of rain, her first thought of Max, who was likely stationed by the porch. She found him there, his black and white fur damp, eyes fixed on the street. Luna and Scout slept in the crate nearby, their presence a testament to Max's gift. Ellie, already up, was taping a new Max's Mission poster to the front door, her enthusiasm undimmed by the drizzle. "We got 3 calls yesterday about stray dogs, Mom," she said, her ponytail bouncing. Sarah smiled, but her gaze lingered on Max, whose posture was tense, his ears twitching at sounds she couldn't hear. The warmth of the community's support was undeniable, but Max's vigilance suggested they were missing something crucial. Tom joined them, his work boots leaving muddy prints as he carried in the morning paper. The headline praised Max's rescues, but Tom's expression was grim. "Found this under the doormat," he said, handing Sarah a folded note. Her stomach dropped as she opened it. Typed in stark black ink, it read, "Stop looking, or you'll regret it." No signature, no address, just a cold warning that sent a chill down her spine. Ellie peered over her shoulder, her eyes widening. "Who wrote that?" she asked, her voice small. Sarah forced a calm tone. "Probably just a prank, Elle, but we'll be careful." Max let out a low growl, his gaze shifting to the woods across the street, and Sarah's reassurance felt hollow. They called Officer Chen, a local police officer who'd been following Max's story since the newspaper article. He arrived within the hour, his patrol car parked discreetly at the curb. Examining the note, he frowned. "Could be someone upset about the attention you're getting," he said, slipping it into an evidence bag. "Or it might be tied to the strays. We've had reports of abandoned dogs in odd places, alleys, empty lots. Your Max might be stirring something up." Sarah showed him the collar, tag, and leash, explaining their connection to Buddy. Chen's eyes narrowed. "I'll check with the shelter and run the note for prints. Keep your eyes open and don't go poking around alone." Despite the warning, Max's behavior grew more intense. He began patrolling the yard at night, his steps deliberate, pausing at the fence to sniff the air. Luna and Scout followed his lead, their once skittish demeanor replaced by a quiet alertness. Sarah noticed Max avoiding his favorite squeaky toy, instead lingering by the gate, his eyes locked on the shadows. One evening, as the family sat down to dinner, Max barked sharply, racing to the back door. Sarah's heart raced as she followed, flashlight in hand. Max led her to the wood's edge, where he stopped, nose low, and pawed at the ground. There, half hidden in the underbrush, was a small dog crate, empty but lined with torn blankets, its door ajar. Tom joined them, his flashlight beam illuminating the crate's rusted hinges. "This wasn't here yesterday," he said, his voice tight. Sarah's mind raced back to the note. Stop looking. Was this a message? A trap? Max sat beside the crate, his growl soft but steady as if guarding it. Sarah called Officer Chen, who arrived with a flashlight and gloves. "This is deliberate," he said, inspecting the crate. "No food, no water, but someone's been here recently. I'm starting to think you're onto something bigger, maybe an abandonment ring." He photographed the crate and took it for evidence, but his words lingered. Bigger. Back inside, Ellie clutched her notebook, her usual spark dimmed by worry. "Are we in trouble because of Max?" she asked, stroking Luna's ears. Sarah knelt beside her. "No, sweetie, Max is doing something amazing and we're helping him. We just need to be smart." Tom nodded, but his jaw was set. "We're not stopping," he said, glancing at Max, who had returned to the porch, his silhouette framed against the rain. Sarah agreed, but the note and crate cast a shadow over their mission. Max wasn't just finding dogs. He was exposing something someone wanted hidden. The next morning, Sarah woke to find Max pacing the yard, his nose pressed to the fence. She joined him, her breath visible in the cool air. "What are you chasing, boy?" she whispered. Max looked up, his eyes steady, then trotted to the gate as if ready to lead again. Sarah's resolve hardened. The note was a threat, but Max's determination was stronger. She texted Chen the farmer's tip about a dog near the old mill, her fingers trembling with anticipation. Whatever Max was uncovering, it was dangerous, but it was also right. The community's support, Ellie's passion and Max's heart were their strength, and they wouldn't back down. As the family prepared to follow Max's next lead, Sarah felt a mix of fear and hope. The crate was a warning, but it was also proof that Max was close to something significant. Buddy, the abandonment ring, or something else entirely, Max knew, and he was asking them to trust him. With Officer Chen's promise of extra patrols and the town's growing involvement, The Thompsons were ready to face the mystery head-on, guided by their extraordinary dog. The Thompson home pulsed with a quiet determination, its porch a symbol of refuge thanks to Max, the border collie whose instincts had saved Luna and Scout and uncovered a troubling mystery. The cryptic note and empty dog crate had deepened the family's resolve, revealing that Max's mission was not just about finding lost dogs, but exposing a hidden abandonment ring. With the community's support and Officer Chen's vigilance, the Thompsons followed Max's lead, trusting his heart to guide them. As Max led them to a final transformative discovery, the family would find closure for Buddy, dismantle a dark operation, and cement their role as a beacon of hope, proving that one dog's courage could change a town forever. Morning broke with a soft pink sky, but the Thompson household was already stirring. Max stood by the front door, his black and white fur catching the dawn light, his eyes fixed on the street. Luna and Scout flanked him, their once timid postures now steady, as if they'd absorbed Max's resolve. Sarah sipped her coffee, the notes warning, "Stop looking, or you'll regret it," etched in her mind. Ellie, sketching in her Max's mission notebook, looked up. "He's ready to go, Mom, I can tell." Sarah nodded, her heart swelling with pride and apprehension. Tom, lacing his boots, met her gaze. "The mill," he said, referring to the farmer's tip about a dog sighting. "That's where Max wants us." They loaded into the car, Max in the back with Ellie, his nose pressed to the window. The old mill, a crumbling relic on the town's outskirts, was a 20-minute drive, its sagging beams and overgrown lot a perfect hiding place. Sarah clutched the farmer's note, her pulse quickening. Officer Chen had agreed to meet them there, his voice grim over the phone. "If there's something at the mill, it could be the break we need." As they pulled onto the dirt road, Max let out a low whine, his body tensing. Sarah's stomach knotted. This felt different, final. The mill loomed ahead, its rusted roof barely visible through the trees. Chen's patrol car was already parked, and he stepped out, motioning for them to stay close. Max leapt from the car, his leash loose in Ellie's hand, and trotted straight to a gap in the mill's boarded-up wall. "He's got something," Tom said, his voice low. Chen nodded, his hand on his radio. "Stay behind me." Max slipped through the gap, and the family followed, their flashlights cutting through the dim interior. The air was thick with dust and the faint smell of damp fur. Max's steps were deliberate, his nose low, leading them past broken crates and tangled ropes. A soft whimper echoed from the back, and Max's ears twitched. He darted toward a pile of old tarps, barking sharply. Sarah's heart raced as Chen pushed the tarps aside, revealing 2 dog crates. Inside the first was a limping spaniel, its fur matted but its eyes bright. The second held a beagle, brown and white, with a familiar, soulful gaze. "Buddy," Ellie whispered, tears welling. Max pressed his nose to the beagle's crate, his tail wagging furiously. Chen opened the doors and the dog stepped out, shaky but alive. The spaniel nuzzled Max while Buddy licked Ellie's hand, his tail a blur. Sarah knelt beside Buddy, her hands trembling as she checked for a collar. A faded tag confirmed it. Buddy. Tears stung her eyes. "You found him, Max," she said, stroking her dog's fur. Tom wrapped an arm around her, his voice thick. "He never gave up." Chen radioed for animal control, his expression a mix of relief and urgency. "There's more here," he said, shining his flashlight on. A stack of papers tucked behind the crates. Sarah scanned them. Lists of dog breeds, dates, and cryptic codes like Drop Site 3. Chen's jaw tightened. This is it, evidence of the abandonment ring. As animal control arrived to take Buddy and the spaniel, named Hazel by Ellie, Chen searched the mill, uncovering more crates, empty but recently used, and a burner phone with texts about moving the stock. "This ties to a network," he told the Thompsons. "Your Max blew it wide open." Back home, the family settled Buddy and Hazel in the laundry room, their porch station now a full-fledged sanctuary. Luna and Scout greeted the newcomers, and Max lay among them, his energy calm but proud, as if he knew his work was done. The community erupted in celebration. The newspaper ran a front-page story, "Hero Dog Busts Abandonment Ring." with a photo of Max surrounded by Buddy, Luna, Scout, and Hazel. Ellie's Max's Mission Club grew, with kids organizing pet adoption drives and trail patrols. The shelter reported a surge in adoptions, inspired by Max's story. Officer Chen called with an update. The mill evidence led to 3 arrests, with more expected. "You and Max changed the game," he said. Sarah smiled, watching Ellie read to the dogs, her notebook now a scrapbook of their journey. One evening, as the family sat on the porch, Max curled up with Buddy, his head resting on the beagle's back. Luna, Scout, and Hazel sprawled nearby, their eyes soft with trust. Neighbors waved as they passed, some leaving treats for Max's friends. Sarah leaned against Tom, her heart full. "He did more than find dogs," she said. "He brought us all together." Ellie, chalking a heart on the sidewalk, looked up. "Max's mission isn't over, is it?" Max lifted his head, his gaze steady, and Sarah laughed. "Not a chance." The mystery was solved, the ring dismantled, but Max's legacy endured. The porch station remained, a symbol of hope for any lost soul, canine or human. Ellie's club planned a summer fair to fund. The shelter and the Thompsons vowed to keep following Max's lead. As spring bloomed, Max led them on walks, his steps lighter but still purposeful, ready for the next call. His heart had transformed their town, proving that love and instinct could overcome even the darkest secrets.